Montana Territory, June of 1873, the wind rolled off the Bitterroot Mountains like a warning. But Evelyn Spencer had long since stopped flinching at things that blew through her life. The sun was just rising over the hills when she stepped out of her cabin, her cotton skirt brushing the worn porch boards. A rifle rested against the doorframe, the front gate hung crooked, and somewhere behind her, her son Samuel was already crying, again. "Ma," came a quieter voice, her daughter, Sadie, just 7, barefoot and holding her little brother's hand. "He's askin' for Papa." Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment. "Go boil water for the oats, sweetheart. I will come in soon." Sadie nodded and tugged Samuel back inside. The cabin door clicked shut. Evelyn stared out across the flat stretch of land that used to belong to her husband's father. Now it was hers, all 36 acres of stubborn dirt, half a chicken coop, and 2 hungry children. Isaac hadn't left a note when he rode off 8 months ago. Just a cold stove, an empty barn, and a promise he had broken 100 times before. This land was not forgiving. And it was not kind to women alone. She picked up the bucket to fetch water when she saw the horse coming down the ridge. Tall, bay-colored, steady. The man riding it wore a wide-brimmed hat, dark coat, and moved with the kind of ease that only came from a life lived mostly outside. Her gut tightened. Strangers out here did not always mean trouble, but they never meant peace. The rider slowed near the fence line. "Ma'am," he called, voice low, calm. "I am not looking to startle, just passin' through. Your gate's off its hinge." Evelyn didn't move. "And you thought you'd fix it." He dismounted slowly, leading his horse closer. "Name's Silas Archer. I was headed to Missoula but spotted the broken fence. Figured someone might need a hand." She eyed him. His face was rough with a few days' stubble, sun-worn and serious. Not handsome in the way storybooks painted, but something steadier, solid. "A hand, huh?" A baby's wail echoed from inside. Silas glanced toward the door. "Sounds like you have your hands full already." Evelyn looked away. "You can fix the gate if you want, but I have nothing to pay you." "I am not looking for money." She hesitated, then turned back toward the house. "Suit yourself." By midday, the gate stood straight again. Silas had reset the hinges, reinforced the post, and even patched a spot along the side where the wood had rotted. Evelyn brought him a tin of water, and for a while they sat quietly under the shade of the porch. "You got a husband off at war?" he asked gently. "No, he left." Silas nodded once. "You and the children managing all right?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. "We are not starving, yet." He looked out toward the sparse field. "Land like this takes more than one pair of hands. I know what it takes." Her voice cracked and she hated it. "I did not mean offense," he said. She stood. "You should be on your way," but he did not move. "Ma'am Evelyn. I spent the last 2 years working cattle up near Helena. Before that, I ran freight between Fort Benton and Bannack. I know what it means to survive, and I know when someone is barely holding it together." She stiffened. "I'm not here to pity you," he added. "I saw your boy crying earlier. He is young enough to forget his father if someone gives him something better to hold on to." Her eyes flashed. "He does not need a stranger." "No," Silas said. "He needs a man who stays." She looked down at her hands. "Calloused, raw. We do not need saving." "I believe you," Silas said, standing. "But help ain't always about saving. Sometimes it is about showing up. I can haul water, fix the roof. You say the word." That evening, he stayed to chop firewood. Samuel sat on the porch steps, watching every swing of the axe with wide eyes. Sadie helped shell peas. Evelyn cooked beans over the fire, her shoulders tense but her heart quieter than it had been in months. When Silas left at sundown, he tipped his hat to the children. "You mind your mother. Will you come back?" Sadie asked shyly. Silas looked to Evelyn. "That is up to her." She met his eyes. "If you are willing to work, we could use the help for a little while." He nodded. "I will return tomorrow then," and he did. Every morning that week, Silas rode up the ridge with his sleeves rolled and a quiet purpose in his step. He patched the barn wall after a storm. He taught Samuel how to hold a hammer. He showed Sadie how to braid rope. He spoke little of himself, but Evelyn watched him closely. He never raised his voice, never touched a thing that was not his. And every night he left with a nod and a promise to return. One afternoon, while they were repairing the chicken coop, Evelyn asked, "Why are you really here?" Silas looked at her. "You mean why am I still here?" She crossed her arms. "I lost someone," he said simply. A long time ago, I have been drifting ever since. This is the first place that has felt like something might start again. Evelyn blinked. You think that is what this is? I think you are strong. I think your children are worth every ounce of sweat I have left, and I think you deserve someone who stays. Her chest tightened. She turned away. You do not know me. I know enough. That night, as the stars blinked alive over the hills, Evelyn stood at the porch railing and watched her son asleep in her arms, his breath soft against her collarbone. Sadie curled near the fire, her doll tucked close. Silas sat nearby, quiet. I thought I was done with men, Evelyn whispered. Done trusting, Silas looked at her. I am not asking you to rush, just let me be here, let me show you. She looked at him for a long, still moment, then she nodded. And for the first time in a long while, Evelyn Spencer felt something close to hope. The rains came softly that week, drawing green from the earth like a secret returned. Evelyn stood at the edge of the vegetable rows, sleeves damp to the elbow, watching Silas kneel beneath the bean trellis. His coat was slung over a fence post, hair darkened by the drizzle. He moved with that same quiet steadiness, not asking what needed doing, just doing it. She leaned on the hoe, the weight of the soil thick at her boots. You ever farm before? She asked. He glanced up, hands slick with mud. My uncle had a plot outside of Abilene, dry land, mean soil, but it fed us mostly. She studied the way he tied twine between the stakes, even and taught. You're too precise for someone who's only mostly farmed. A flicker of something passed through his eyes, pain, maybe, or memory. He died when I was 16. After that, I worked freight, hard to plant roots when you're hauling someone else's. Evelyn pressed the hoe blade into the ground, then stepped back. You could have kept going, north or west. There's nothing here but hard work and fewer neighbors. I've had enough empty miles, he said. And I figure some places are worth staying for, even if they don't look like much at first. The wind stirred the damp hem of her dress. She didn't answer. Behind them, Sadie's laughter carried from the cabin. She was chasing Samuel through puddles, both of them soaked and shrieking with the kind of joy Evelyn hadn't heard in months. When she turned back, Silas was watching the children with that same quiet expression he always wore when they weren't looking, somewhere between longing and reverence. They like you, Evelyn said. I like them. They call you Mr. Silas when you're not around. A small smile touched his mouth. Better than the man with muddy boots. She set the hoe aside and brushed her palms clean on her skirt. You want to eat with us tonight? He stood, wiping his hands on his trousers. If you're offering. I wouldn't ask if I weren't, she said. I've got salt pork and potatoes. Not much, but enough. I've eaten less and called it supper. That evening, the cabin was warm with the smell of frying fat and wood smoke. Evelyn worked beside the stove, sleeves rolled, hair pinned back. Silas sat at the table, helping Samuel line up little carved animals along the edge. Sadie was humming a tune she'd learned the day before, a soft rise and fall of sound that made the room feel softer somehow. When the food was served, Evelyn slid into the seat across from Silas. He waited until she picked up her fork before lifting his own. This table's steadier than it looks, he said, running a hand along the edge. My husband built it before Sadie was born. Took him 2 weeks, start to finish. Claimed it'd last longer than anything bought from town. Silas nodded. Looks like he was right. She didn't speak again until Samuel dropped his spoon. She bent to pick it up, brushing dirt from the floor. When she straightened, Silas was watching her, not with pity, but with a kind of quiet awareness. You ever think about leaving? He asked. Not once. Even when things got hard, she met his gaze steady. Especially then, he looked down at his plate. I admire that. I didn't do it to be admired. I did it because no one else was going to make sure my babies ate. I know, he said, but you still did it. That counts. The fire cracked low in the hearth. When the meal was done, Evelyn gathered the dishes, but Silas stood and took them from her hands. You cook, I clean, he said. Seems fair. She hesitated. You don't need to, I want to. Outside, the rain had stopped. The sky was a deep violet, clouds heavy with the last of the storm. Silas moved easily in the space that wasn't yet his, rinsing plates with well water, drying them with a cloth Sadie handed him. The rhythm of it was simple, familiar, not rushed. Later, as the children slept and the fire dimmed, Evelyn stood at the doorway, arms folded. Silas stepped beside her, shoulder brushing hers. "You planning to stay the night?" she asked, voice low. He shook his head. "I'll bunk in the shed just until it dries out. You sure?" "There's space by the hearth." "I wouldn't risk your name like that, not with folks talking the way they do." She turned to him. "You think I haven't already lost everything worth gossiping about?" He didn't answer right away. "I think you've still got more than most." Evelyn watched him step down into the wet grass, boots squelching. He paused at the shed door, then looked back up at her. "I'll start on the fence by the road tomorrow," he said. She nodded once. "I'll have coffee on at sunrise." He gave a small tilt of his head, then disappeared inside the dark. Evelyn shut the door, leaned her back against it, and closed her eyes. The house felt different now. Not full, exactly, but no longer hollow. And for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel as though she was waiting for someone to come back. She felt like someone had finally arrived. The fence along the road took 4 days. Not because it was long, it wasn't, but because Silas set every post by hand, measuring the distance between them with rope and care, as if the line itself might hold more than livestock. Evelyn watched from the porch each morning as he worked, hammering in rhythm with the sun, never asking for more than what she offered. Coffee at dawn, supper at dusk, a place to belong that wasn't promised and wasn't expected. On the 5th morning, when Samuel woke with a fever, Evelyn didn't go out to meet Silas. She sat by the cot with a damp cloth and a bowl of cool water, brushing sweat from her son's brow as he whimpered through shallow sleep. "He's warm," she said when Silas stepped through the open door uninvited but not unwelcome. "I saw the curtain down," he said. "Figured something was wrong. His head's hot. He won't eat." Silas knelt beside her, careful not to touch the boy. "Could be the spring sickness. My mother used to make a tea out of willow bark and elderflower. I don't have willow." She folded the cloth again, dipped and wrung it. "I haven't been to town in over a month. I'll ride in then." He stood. "I know what to ask for. There's a woman near the post office who keeps dried herbs in jars." Evelyn looked up. "You do that. I'll be back by nightfall." He didn't wait for permission. Just turned and left, saddle creaking as he mounted, and vanished into the road dust. By the time the sun hit its peak, Samuel's fever had climbed. Evelyn kept the windows open and the fire down, coaxing the boy to drink from a tin spoon. Sadie sat on the floor, doll forgotten in her lap, her small face drawn tight. "Will he die?" she asked quietly. "No," Evelyn said too quickly. Then softer, "He's strong. Like your papa was when he was little." Sadie didn't answer. She just leaned against her mother's knee and stayed there, silent. It was past dark when Silas returned. His coat was damp with sweat and his horse looked ready to drop. "I got everything she said," he said, stepping inside. Willow bark meant something called feverfew. She said to steep it together and keep him cool. Evelyn took the bundle from his hands. "Thank you." He glanced toward the cot. "He's still burning up. Worse." Silas dropped his hat and moved toward the hearth. "I'll light the stove. You get the water." They moved fast, boiling and steeping, straining through muslin. Evelyn tipped the mixture into a cup and brought it to Samuel's lips. He cried at first, weak and hoarse, but swallowed enough to still his shaking. Afterward, Evelyn stepped outside to breathe. The stars were low and full. The air smelled of wood smoke and wet sage. Silas joined her, sleeves rolled to the elbow. "He'll come through." "You don't know that." "No," he said, "but I've seen worse pull through, and he's got grit." Evelyn crossed her arms, rubbing at the chill. "I didn't know what to do, I just sat there." "I've always known what to do, and today I didn't." "You did exactly what you were supposed to. You stayed." She turned her face toward him, the moonlight soft on her cheek. "You didn't have to ride all that way." "I did." He shrugged. There wasn't anyone else who would have. They stood in silence, the kind that didn't strain to be filled, the kind that let things settle between them. "You ever have children?" she asked. "No," came close once. "She died before the baby could take its first breath." Evelyn didn't speak, but her hand found the porch post, fingers curling around the edge. "I buried them on a hill in Texas," he said. "Haven't stayed anywhere long since." She looked at him then, really looked, the lines at his mouth. The tiredness that wasn't just in his body but in his bones. "I'm sorry," she said. "I was too, for a long time." A breeze lifted her hair. She didn't pull away when he stepped closer. I don't know what this is, she said, but you're here, and I'm not afraid of that, Silas nodded. That's enough for me. Inside, Samuel coughed once, then stilled. Evelyn turned and went back in. Silas followed, quiet. The boy slept deeper now, his breathing easier. Sadie lay curled beside him, thumb in her mouth, one arm thrown protectively over her brother's chest. I'll take the chair, Silas said. You rest near them. Evelyn hesitated. Then she pulled a quilt from the foot of the bed and laid it over the children. She sat on the floor beside them, back against the wall. Silas leaned back in the rocker, boots stretched toward the dying fire. Neither of them spoke again that night. But in the hush of the cabin, with breath rising slow and steady, something settled between them. Not a promise, not yet, but the shape of one, beginning. By the time the fever broke, the last of the snowmelt had vanished from the gullies, and the soil turned warm beneath bare feet. Samuel opened his eyes 3 mornings after drinking the tea, his small voice raspy but clear as he asked for water. Evelyn pressed her lips to his brow once, then stood and stepped outside to where Silas was oiling the hinges on the barn door. He's better, she said. Silas looked up. I figured when I didn't hear you pacing. She crossed her arms, shoulders easing. He asked for bread. I set some out to rise on the stove last night, he said, nodding toward the house. Should be ready by now. Evelyn narrowed her eyes slightly. You bake. I can follow a recipe if it's short enough. He wiped his hands on a rag. Besides, I've been told I'm good with flour and fences. She didn't smile exactly, but the corners of her mouth lifted just enough to show she'd heard him. That evening, after the children were asleep, Evelyn stepped out to the lean-to behind the shed. Silas was sitting on an upturned crate, sharpening a drawknife as a lantern flickered beside him. The air smelled of resin and pine shavings. You been carving again? She asked. He nodded toward a small stack of wood near his feet. Made Samuel a horse. Sadie's getting a comb next. She's been using a chicken feather. She won't say it, but she'll keep that forever. Evelyn leaned against the post, arms folded. Silas rested the blade across his thigh. I thought about leaving today, she straightened. Why? He didn't look at her right away. Because I don't want to outstay what's been given. You think helping save my boy earned you a time limit. I think this land's seen enough men come and go. I don't want to be another. Evelyn stepped forward, her boots crunching softly over the straw. Then don't be. He looked up at that. She continued. I don't need someone to fix things. I need someone who doesn't back up the minute it gets quiet. I don't mind silence, he said. I've noticed. She knelt beside him, fingers grazing the grain of the carved horse. You're not like Isaac. He was loud when he was scared. Silas set the knife down. You're not like anyone I've ever met. They sat there, close enough to share breath, but still apart by a space neither had yet dared to cross. Silas said, I've never built anything that stayed. No home. No family. Evelyn answered, I've built everything I have with hands that shook half the time. He reached out, slow and sure, and touched the back of her hand. She didn't pull away. I don't want to pass through you like a season, he said. I want to be part of the harvest. Her breath caught. Then start planting. They stayed there until the lantern guttered low. When she stood, he followed, and they didn't speak as they walked back toward the house. She opened the door, and this time, she didn't leave it behind her. Inside, the fire still held its heat, and Samuel's breathing was even. Sadie shifted in her sleep as Silas laid his coat over the back of the chair. You can take the cot, Evelyn said, nodding toward the corner. I'll be near the hearth. I don't mind the floor, I know, she said. But I'd like you rested. There's still fencing to finish tomorrow. He nodded once, not asking for more. As the flames settled low, Evelyn lay awake, her eyes on the dark curve of the ceiling beams. Behind her, the soft creak of the cot marked Silas's breath. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Outside, spring had taken hold. The wind no longer warned. It beckoned. The wheat Evelyn had sown in March came up thin that year, but it stood. That morning, she ran her fingers through the stalks while Sadie crouched at the edge of the field, showing Samuel how to press prints into the soft dirt with a flat stone. The sun sat high and warm, and the air carried the scent of crushed thistle and distant river water. Silas was behind the house, fitting hinges to a new cellar door. His hammer struck wood at a steady pace measured, not rushed. Evelyn had come to know that rhythm like she knew the curve of her land. It had become something she could count on. When she reached the house, she didn't go inside. She leaned against the porch post and waited. He noticed her before she spoke. "You think we'll have enough to trade come fall?" she asked. He brushed sawdust from his sleeve. "If the potatoes come in and the hens keep laying, we'll have something to bring to town." She nodded, then tilted her head. "You ever think about staying through winter?" He met her gaze, face unreadable. "I've thought about it. I'd need help putting up the storm shutters. I'd help with that." She stepped closer. "And someone to ride into town for salt and sugar once the snows set in. I've got a good horse." Evelyn folded her arms, watching his face. "It's not just chores I'm asking about. I know." They stood quiet for a breath. A breeze moved through the wheat behind her, brushing the stalks like fingers through hair. "You're not a man who asks," she said. "You offer. You wait. You've had enough folks take what they wanted." "I have." He set the hammer down across his thigh. "I'm not trying to replace anything. I'm just hoping to be chosen." Evelyn stepped onto the worn porch boards and reached out, resting her hand against his chest. His shirt was warm from the sun. Beneath it, she felt the steadiness she'd come to trust more than words. "I've been standing on the edge of something," she said. "Not sure if it would hold." "I'll hold," he said. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her hand stayed where it was, and his covered it. That night, after the children slept, Evelyn stood at the stove, ladling soup into bowls. She'd picked the late squash herself, and the broth smelled of onion and thyme. Silas set the table without being asked. When they sat, she didn't speak right away. She watched him eat, watched him glance toward the bedroom where the children slept, listened to the way the wind shifted against the eaves. "You never asked what happened to him," she said. Silas looked up, spoon halfway to his mouth. He didn't set it down, but he waited. "I don't know where he went," she said. "Isaac. He left before the frost, said he was riding to Helena for work. I packed him bread in a flask. He never got there. You think he's dead? I think he's gone." Silas gave a single nod. "You don't owe me the story." "I wanted you to know," she said. "I don't carry love for him anymore, just the weight of what he left behind." Silas didn't reach for her, didn't speak over it. He just looked at her like he'd been listening since the first time he'd seen her on the porch, arms crossed, jaw set against the world. "Then let's build something new," he said. She nodded once, and in that nod was every answer she hadn't been able to say. They married in August, in the meadow behind the house. Sadie wore a garland of dry wildflowers and walked beside her mother, proud and solemn. Samuel clutched a carved wooden horse and refused to let go of Silas's hand. The preacher from town came out on a mule, dusty and sunburnt, but he smiled when he saw the way Evelyn stood beside Silas like the earth wouldn't move her. Afterward, they ate bread and dried apples under the cottonwood tree. The sun hung low, and the children ran barefoot in the grass. Evelyn sat with her back against the trunk, her skirt spread out beside Silas's knee. Their shoulders touched. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The first snow came late that year. Evelyn stood in the doorway, wrapped in her shawl, watching flakes settle on the fence posts Silas had mended. Behind her, Samuel was stacking kindling, and Sadie was stitching a small patch onto her winter dress. Silas was at the table, carving a new spoon for the kitchen drawer. She turned to him. "If I hadn't let you fix that gate, you think you'd have kept riding?" He looked up, knife still in his grip. "I was never going to pass you by." She stepped toward him and leaned down, pressing her lips to his temple, then his cheek, then the corner of his mouth. He didn't move, didn't pull her closer, he just let the moment settle. Later, she sat beside him, and they watched the snow fall together. No words, no need. Evelyn had never expected to fall in love again. Not here. Not with a man who carried his past in silence and offered his future through sweat and stillness. But she had. And Silas had found what he'd never thought he'd hold again, a home, not built in walls, but in the way a woman could look at you and see not where you'd been, but what you could become. They lived quiet years after that. Rich in work, in laughter, in the kind of love that wasn't loud but lasted. The wheat grew stronger each spring, and the fence never sagged again. In the evenings, they sat on the porch while the children chased fireflies. Silas would rest his hand on hers, and Evelyn would lean against his shoulder, watching the sun slip behind the hills she had once faced alone. She wasn't alone now. She never would be again.